Welcome, everyone. I almost said game on because, this is not my podcast. It's the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast with, I'm sure you guys have noticed, no Michael Beller. Yay! No, I'm just kidding. Michael Beller is out with baby duty, so it's myself and Brandon Funston as always, but, it's kind of boring just talking to each other as much as we do, more so because I think Brandon's already tired of talking to me. So I brought in a guest, one of my favorites if you listen to his show. I was already on there talking wide receivers with the NFL prospects. It's Scott Bogman of In This League. So before we even get anywhere, Scott, go ahead. Pimp yourself, man. We don't do guests on this show often, and you're one of the first. So we got you and Emery. It was like the top of my list.
Well, I really appreciate that. To be in company with Emery is amazing. So I appreciate that. But yeah, you can find all my work over at on my Twitter at Bogman Sports. I tweet everything out that I do. Obviously, the Welsh and I have been around for a while. If you guys know us at In This League, you can check out our Patreon, patreon.com/ITL Army, where we got all kinds of stuff. I'm doing NFL draft rankings. I concentrate more on actually ranking them after the draft when they're assigned to teams, but I do have a pre-draft ranking too, which won't matter in 3 weeks because they'll be on teams. But the Welsh does baseball stuff over there as well. We have MLB rankings. He does over 500 minor league rankings. We have group me rooms. So it's a lot of fun. As we like to say it In This League, so much fun. That's what we like to have, because fantasy is supposed to be fun first before anything else. So we like to enjoy it and have a great time.
And these are guys to have a great time with. I don't know if Brandon knows, but I spent the time in your place on an air mattress because we were having fun out there with cats waking me up at 3:00 in the morning. But yeah, that's a story for another day.
They're used to that. I'm not used to being awake this early, Jake. This 8:30 in the morning stuff.
Well, it's 8:30 for
Jake,
you and Brandon.
You're kind of princess in the pea, so I'm wondering how you're doing on an inflatable air mattress there.
Princess in the pea. What I don't get the reference explained for.
Well, so the princess, she was sleeping there and she kept complaining about she was uncomfortable, and there was a pea underneath the mattress, and that was what she was throwing.
And they kept
her off.
adding mattresses, which is exactly what Jake keeps doing too, except for he has to send the one back. Before.
That is true. I've tried double digits mattresses trying to find one. I'm still working. I'm sure people saw my wonderful tweet about
there you go,
Ghost Bed. Yeah, Ghost Bed wasn't the best experience there, but yeah, I've been working on that. Hey, the other thing, Fuss, is not even just the pee. If, you touched the door handle coming into my bedroom, I will wake up. Like I will never get attacked and die in my sleep. I'll know when I'm dying. If somebody's gonna attack and kill me, I'll know what's happening.
Yeah, Jake definitely did not complain about the gate by my by my apartment that opens and closes nonstop. So
he said sarcastically.
It's not even the gate. It's the fact you're the first place right next to it.
Yeah, literally next to the gate. The gate opens up next to my apartment. So
and I was on the air mattress by his sliding door to the outside. So
yep.
It's
you might hear the gate in my bedroom, so it doesn't bother me at all.
But in any case, all right. So speaking, you said the rookies. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking running backs today. We're talking wide receivers Thursday with Emery Hunt. Next week we have Marcus Grant. Look at this company you're in with, Scott. So we have that, and then that's going to be next for everybody. Next week we're doing Wednesday, Friday, because we're going to do Wednesday and then Friday to recap the first round. So it's a little bit of schedule difference for everything. But let's jump into it. And I'm just going to start off with this because I have on the site my profiles. Everybody out there at this point, I think, has a feeling of what the breakdown of every player is. So we're going to kind of skew this more to fantasy purposes, which is the Athletic Fantasy Football Show, but not necessarily we can definitely talk about the strengths and weaknesses, but this isn't going to be what do you think about this guy? What do you think about this? What do you think? So first question, and Brandon's the co-host, so you're going to have to wait, Scott. I'm going to him first.
yeah, as you should.
So Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, would you agree? This is the first question. Would you agree they're in a tier of their own? They're the top two.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Look, I like Javonte Williams. He is my third. I think he's most people's third as well, and he is a legit talent. But if I'm an NFL team and I'm looking at, I think you have a clear Najee Harris or Travis Etienne, and it probably just comes down to which style of those two backs you want to be the featured guy in your backfield. But I don't think you can go beyond those two. I think they're the clear premier talents.
Do you agree, Scott? Because I know you're a Williams guy.
Yeah, I actually disagree. I put Javonte Williams in that group too. I just think that he he did develop a little bit late, as did Michael Carter at UNC, but I do think that once given the chance, given the full workload, he's going to be able to handle it. So I put him in that group with those guys too. I think after that, it's a pretty big drop off though. So, but there are a lot of backs to like here. When I looked at this class, I kind of went in thinking, all right, it's Najee, it's Etienne, maybe Williams is in there with them, maybe not. And then it's, a pretty big drop off. There is a significant drop off, but there's a lot to like below those guys, I think, more than I expected.
Yeah, so two things. I think there's the big difference is the Williams, it seems, out there, like Brandon said. It's funny, is you have three opinions here. Well, I mean, that's not too weird because those are the only three opinions you could have. But I'm just saying, like, they're very clear cut this year. I think there's a lot of people like you who are like, Williams deserves to be there. There's a lot of people like me who are like, no, he's in the next tier, which isn't a bad thing. He's just in the next tier. And then you have like Funston going straight down the middle, which is like, I could see it, but he's not there for me. Again, I guess those are the only three opinions you could have. But I'm saying, like, it seems like nobody's kind of dancing around of like, well, I could see him be there if he's in this situation, but he's not going to be if he's in this situation. It's just whether or not you believe he's there. So let's take this to the next. Oh, by the way, both you guys, Etienne. I looked it up.
Etienne,
I double triple text. Stop saying Etienne. It's Etienne. We're making this official.
We did this on my show too. I think,
know.
Jake, where it is Etienne, but I always think of shrimp etouffee,
right.
And
well, and I already said that
French,
if it's the Cajun pronunciation, it's actually Etienne. And we're not saying Etienne. So we're going with the kid says. But Brandon, so whether or not, let's just take this tier, whether you include Williams or not. Let's actually, you know what? Let's throw him in this conversation for this reason. Of Harris, of Etienne, of Williams, if you put him there, is it not going to matter for you if it's Pittsburgh or Miami or anybody that takes him in the first round? If one of these running backs or any of these running backs go in the first round, what's your opinion on the potential of them being an RB1 in fantasy as a rookie?
I don't think it will matter. Look, I was kind of thinking about that last year. I mean, would it have mattered if Cam Akers went to Baltimore and J.K. Dobbins went to the Rams, or you mixed and matched some of these guys? It really, when you're talking about this kind of talent, it's really about opportunity. And so I think if it's Pittsburgh and you start to feel good about, okay, maybe they'll have a decent offensive line, which is still in question. If it's Miami and Brian Flores loves to kind of feature a guy. He did it with very unfeaturable running backs last year, Myles Gaskin and Salvin Ahmed. But if you land there with all those weapons that they're compiling around there, I would definitely think about it. I mean, look at James Robinson had the most, he had the biggest opportunity among all running backs last year, and it led him to being an RB1. That's volume is king in fantasy. And when you're talking about guys that are this talented, if they can get that kind of volume, and you can imagine it in Pittsburgh, you can imagine it in Miami, then yeah, I'm going to be willing to consider them as top 12 running backs.
Same, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit more like it does depend, just for the simple fact of, the back end of the first round. There's been a lot of buzz about potentially the Bucks adding Travis Etienne, which
running backs.
I know is eye rolling and ridiculous, but when you think about what Bruce Arians does, it's not out of the realm of possibility. You know what I mean? So I do think it does matter more, but I think Pittsburgh and Miami, like you guys both mentioned, are the two high favorites to land.
Well, then I'll stick with you, Scott. Are we basically saying if Pittsburgh drafts anybody in the first two rounds, we're just RB1, we're done?
Yeah.
We're not playing the McFarlane, Benny Snell. Like, we're done with all the other guys. It's whoever they draft. If it's the first two rounds.
I think RB1, like if you're talking about team, not fantasy wise, RB1, they're not. I don't think they're a top 12 running back immediately going in. Because,
really?
Like Funston said, the Steelers. I'm a Steelers fan. The line sucks. I want them to take Jenkins or another tackle at that spot.
I understand that, but there's the study out there. I think Mike Tagliere did it, where it's the bottom third or fourth offensive lines have never produced, and with the offense have never produced a top 5 running back, but they have made RB1s. Like, I'm of the opinion, and stick with you real quick, Scott, because this is your team. I'm of the opinion if Harris goes to the Steelers in round 1, I went down my list and I'd plug him right in at RB10. Because for me, he's a better Josh Jacobs, and for everybody. So you look at that
in my notes. I literally have he's somewhere between Henry and Jacobs as far as Alabama running backs go. So
and that's where we go. And so if you said Harris, that again you hesitated, but if Harris was the pick in round 1, not Etienne, so would you go Harris RB1, Etienne maybe not?
Yes, I think Harris has the most likely to land as an RB1 if it's in Pittsburgh. I think that's the best spot any running back could land in, and like the highest value going into the season. I think I'm going to agree with that. But if it's Etienne, if it's Williams, I think just because not necessarily for Etienne, he has the experience in having those carries, but he also has the experience in having, 8-foot holes to run through. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like the dude had to work extra crazy hard for his yards being at Clemson. So, and he has explosiveness. He's just not also built like Najee Harris. Najee Harris is a big back that's going to be a bruiser. So I think that Etienne is
poor Najee behind that Alabama offensive line.
Right. Well, not okay, but Najee's more of a grinder too. I think he works better in between the tackles. You're absolutely right, though. I mean, the road was paved for him absolutely most of the time. But I just think that. I think Najee Harris, I think you're right. Yes. If he goes to Pittsburgh, that's the highest ranking we're going to have for a running back in this class, regardless where anybody else ends up, I think.
So, Brandon, let me kind of switch the question for you. I have a feeling you agree with the Pittsburgh sentiment, correct?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So then is there another team at all in the first round where a running back in that situation, whether it's Etienne, whether it's Harris, whether it's Williams in a surprise in the first round? I say only because nobody has him going in the first round. A lot of people have him in the second round. But is there another team? Because I'm looking down the list, and there's been some people who have said maybe the Bills go back to a running back if one of those two are there because the Zach Moss isn't working and Singletary is not working. Doesn't feel like the best spending of their draft capital, but they're there. Peter Schrager just released his second mock today and has Etienne going to Washington in the first round at the 19th pick. We talked about the Dolphins, and then the Jets have been rumored that if Etienne is there at 23. So Funston, any of these teams or all these situations kind of giving you the feeling of the Miles Sanders of the world, where Jonathan Taylor of last year, Cam Akers of last year, where not the best spot, but we could be seeing him as an RB1 not until the middle of the season.
Yeah, don't let Travis Etienne go to the Jets. Please don't let that happen. Look, I think I think from a fantasy perspective, we want Najee Harris in Pittsburgh, and I think we want Etienne in Miami. To me, that feels like the best way to get the max value out of them in 2021 and the near term future, or at least for the next few years anyway. So I think that's the case. Yeah, I don't really want Etienne to land in the first round if Najee Harris is going to Pittsburgh. I was looking at teams like what could be great. Like it's not their MO, but San Francisco doesn't have a slam dunk running back. They have the guys like they always do. They like their late rounders and their undrafted free agents. But if San Francisco were to take like a round 3 running back, I'd kind of get interested. I'm kind of getting ahead of what your question is, Jake, when it's talking about
just
Etienne.
a little bit.
But I think for Etienne, it's better that he lands early in the second round to a team like Miami or Atlanta even. I mean, Atlanta would be good as well.
I was going to say, so that was the one that we didn't really touch on because they're picking so early in the first round. We kind of like pushed them aside as not really considering the Harris or the Etienne. But if Etienne slipped out, or even if it ended up being Williams or somebody like along those, maybe they shock us with Khalil Herbert, whatever it might be. Is Atlanta the most underrated, best potential situation from a fantasy perspective that people aren't really looking at because of where they're drafting?
Go ahead, Scott.
I kind of think the Jets are. I kind of think the Jets are. I think, look, the Atlanta added Mike Davis, and I think he's going to have the majority of the carries for them this year. He did a great job filling in for Christian McCaffrey last year. They cut Ito Smith. They really don't have a lot on that roster, so they're definitely going to be taking it back. I think whoever they take will be complimentary to Mike Davis, though. They have so many holes on defense too. They need to not be taking running back till a little bit later, but. I think, with a new coach in Saleh coming in, you're going to have a rookie quarterback as well in Zach Wilson in New York. And this is what they did in San Francisco, and they were wildly successful. They may use a rotation of backs, because they have LaMichael Pirine as well. But I think if they snap up somebody with that 23 pick or early in the second round, I think that guy could get a lot of work too. So I'm a little bit on board with the Jets getting someone as far as fantasy goes for this season.
Yeah, and I should maybe give the Jets credit for having a new regime and not being Adam Gase anymore.
Right.
The question is can they build Rome in a day? And we'll have to see about that if they can kind of replicate what San Francisco has right away. Maybe it won't be such a bad landing spot for somebody. But as far as Atlanta goes, I think Etienne would be a great complimentary back. I kind of thought of Alvin Kamara when I was watching. I've seen that thrown out. He is that kind of a running back in my mind, which you don't really want the 20 plus touches, but you want maybe something that 15 to 20 range, and you run a Latavius Murray or Mark Ingram kind of complimentary guy between the tackles, and maybe Mike Davis can be that guy, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
All right, so if we're talking other running backs, are these the only three that we think could have the potential to be RB1s, or is there anybody, Scott, that maybe from the next group, which we're going to about talk here, is in my tier was Williams, whether or not we already covered him though, but Michael Carter, Sermon, I mentioned Khalil Herbert, Kenneth Gainwell. I kind of feel like Kenneth Gainwell is the clearest timeshare option, but maybe of any of the other three, do we have a situation where you could see, let's say this, Pittsburgh doesn't go round one, but they take one of those in round two?
Right. Yeah. I think that's the scenario that you're looking at. It's either a team waiting to take a running back who is desperate for a running back like Miami, like Pittsburgh, the Jets. I think that is a potential situation for one of those guys. But I think in the majority, for the most part, the rest of these guys are going to be complimentary backs especially for this year. I'm not saying that they can't take a number one job. They can't fill in if there's an injury in front of them or something, but I don't see running back one for most of these other guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be, maybe the Buffalo, as you brought up earlier, if they take a guy in the second or third round and he really emerges in camps and becomes a guy. I mean, it's a good enough offense to have the helium to support that if they really kind of leaned on one guy, but it's hard to see that with Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, that those guys wouldn't be in the mix. So again, I go back to the 49ers. If the 49ers were to pick somebody, higher than we've seen them do in a while, then I'd suddenly be very interested in seeing how that played out. But for the most part, I think we've kind of covered the RB1 upside potential in lieu of, not accounting for injuries that might happen.
Right. Of course. Yeah. For not injured, but yeah, I'm looking at it too. And I gotta be honest, like, I know we're talking about it, but we hit on the Jets, we hit on the Falcons, and because of where they are, to go back to what you said, Scott, I do think if either of those teams do invest a first 3 rounds pick on any of these, that where if it falls to the third round, we're not talking RB1 out of the gates like Harris, or even if Etienne, and basically let's put Pittsburgh aside. We're all kind of on this. Pittsburgh likely going to have an RB1 situation on their hands, but all those, like the Jets, the Falcons, if the 49ers wait, those feel like, to go back to the Miles Sanders, to go back to last year's rookies, as in they're probably going to get a ton of height. They might be overdrafted. You might be better waiting or just ignoring it altogether because you have week 6 or 7 before they're the lead option. Like, let's say
Antonio Gibson from last year. I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at, I think.
Miles Gaskin.
Guys.
I'm a Miles Gaskin guy. See, Scott, you remember that. Like, I'm a Miles Gaskin guy, but I don't believe the Dolphins want him to be the answer. I think
he's not the answer. They tried it last year, and then they know he ain't the answer. So,
but where if the Dolphins, let's say the Dolphins wait and middle of round 3, they take Herbert. I think Herbert's the intriguing stash him and wait till week 6 or 7, and then he's the guy. But he's not going to be the guy from day one.
Yeah, I think there are some guys like that. I think what we get past this group is guys that are going to develop. And once again, I've said this on every show where I talk about rookies. No, not a single rookie that's coming in is done learning and getting polish and figuring stuff out. You get different coaches, you get a different workout regime, you get whatever it is, new teammates, new tips, new tricks, whatever. and guys develop to be new players. I mean, no one knew who Raheem Mostert was coming into the NFL, and he's a really good back now. He's not an RB1 for fantasy, but he's really good. And
well, that's why I like Brandon's 49ers. I've been saying this for years. Shanahan is the Midas touch of running backs.
It's such
he
a good
could take
call.
me and make me average 1 yard per carry instead of 0.
I mean, maybe a half, but
maybe a half.
Appreciable yards, though.
yeah, exactly. But you're absolutely right. I think New England's in that scenario too. I think it's the reverse where they just throw a bunch of crap and see what sticks versus, hey, here's the Midas touch. But I do think that if the Patriots take somebody, that could be their main guy because they have so many half running backs here. You have kind of a half a running back here, a half a running back there, but they like to throw out all 30 of them in every game. So it's
I was going to say, what
they
happens
should just take
have...
Chris Evans. He's used to that stuff at Michigan.
I was going to say, when you have 5 halves of running backs, you have none. There you go.
Right.
Brandon, same thing. Like the Dolphins, the Gaskin, like that type of situation. Let me kind of spin this a different way because I got some of this pushback last year, and it makes sense. So this is going to come down to know your league. But the thing with this, Brandon, is like if you invest a 6th round pick on let's just play a situation. I'm going to go back to Herbert. I like Herbert. I think Herbert could be one of those sneaky ones for this year. Obviously, that's where I keep going back to him for that reason. But let's play this scenario out. Let's say Herbert round 3, Dolphins. Gaskin is still an issue. Herbert goes 6th round ADP in drafts, maybe. Is this you draft him and hold him and bite the bullet because so many people will see I invested that 6th round pick. I'm not going to trade him to you because I know what could like it's almost the guy who drafts him doesn't want to give him up for a discount.
Yeah, I'm stuck on them taking Herbert specifically. Like he's 5'8", and it's like if you're wanting to replace Gaskin,
nothing wrong with being 5'8", Funston. Come
no,
on,
I'm
5'8".
I don't look down very far at 5'8", not very far, just a little bit. But I'm thinking, look at Brian Flores again. I go back to Myles Gaskin is not a big guy. Salvin Ahmed wasn't either, but he was giving them like 20, 25 touches. He wants to feature a guy. I'd be very shocked if Khalil Herbert is the guy in the 3rd round.
Okay, Trey Sermon. For the argument's sake.
Perfect. 6 foot, 210, 15 pounds.
But yeah, so get back to my original question. Is this almost like if you want him, you have to draft him because whoever drafts him is not going to be willing? Like, look at last year. People who drafted Jonathan Taylor even before that situation played out. Even Cam Akers. People didn't want to trade them away because they're like, I invested a 6th round pick. I'm not going to give him up for 9th round value.
I don't think they have that value. I mean, I'll just say that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I would treat whoever Miami took in the 3rd round just like I treated Cam Akers last year, which was I held on to him forever and ever and cussed out Sean McVay for week after week after week for not using him until finally when it was too late. But
as soon as he got the starting gig, he broke his rib and missed some weeks. It was the most annoying situation ever.
Yes. Let's hope that Miami doesn't replicate the Rams situation. But they have four picks in the first 2 rounds, and they're in a great position to add other needs while also taking Etienne early in the 2nd round and just taking care of that position altogether in my mind. Or Javonte Williams. They could take, maybe they could use their 50th overall pick, the second round pick on Javonte Williams. And there you go. You got a guy that looks like he can really handle a heavy workload.
Well, then I'm glad you brought up Etienne because I was going to circle back to him. So I mentioned it before. Peter Schrager put out his mock 2.0, and he's one of the more accurate. I mean, you get 10 picks right in the 1st round, and you're amazing. But he's one of the more accurate, and that's what's made everybody. We're on Twitter this morning as this is Tuesday. Everybody's raising eyebrows everywhere. Everybody, the one pick everybody was talking about from Peter Schrager's draft was he had Etienne mocked to Washington. In some ways, I see, and that's what people are arguing back. So it makes sense in some ways because they have Antonio Gibson. McKissick ended up having all that value last year. They just cut Bryce Love after not being able to get him healthy and what they had in him. I don't think Washington's set with Gibson and essentially right now, nothing else. And I'm putting that in quotes and nothing else. Where I don't think the value is there for the 1st round is Washington. Let's say they do take a running back. Let's say round 1. Let's say 2nd round, 3rd round. Is Gibson the most risky? And that's where I'm going to head and kind of pivot this into another conversation. Is Gibson value right now? Is it like dynasty keeper league, Scott? Is like get out because his value is so on a thread right now if they do draft a 1, 2, 3rd round running back?
I don't think so. And the reason why for me is that Antonio Gibson is not a guy that needs the ball 25 times a game to be successful. And he can be lined up as a wide receiver. Remember, this is a guy I think took 34 carries or 64 carries or something in that range in college. And so he was very, very raw. Yeah,
he barely pass caught, and he ran most of the time. It was so weird.
Very, very raw as a running back. Exactly, he has more carries in his NFL career than he had in his college career. It's nuts. So, but they can line him up in the slot. He can do too much. So no, I don't think I'm getting out of Antonio Gibson, even if they were to draft a high 1st round pick. But I think they need a tackle too bad, and they might be in the play for a quarterback to take a running back there. But they do need playmakers for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Etienne thing's just interesting because, as I just mentioned, I saw the Kamara, and Gibson kind of the same way. They're both very multiple in their versatility, and you could have a lot of fun with those two. And they could, and as Scott said, Gibson doesn't need a ton of touches, and neither does Etienne. And they're both very proficient in the passing game, so that could be a lot of fun for an offense and keep defenses guessing. And that would be almost the specific reason why it's more about the player than it is about the position for Washington. Is just like, look, we see what Etienne could bring to us. Man, imagine having both of Gibson and Etienne in that backfield. And then if Etienne's gone, I think that just goes away. And, they're going to consider maybe depth running back more in the middle rounds.
Right. Yeah, see,
they have 2 3rd round picks, so they might snap one up there.
I can, and you know what? If it's Gainwell, go back to Herbert, Michael Carter, like that complimentary piece, which is crazy because as you mentioned, Scott, that was the thing. Gibson coming out, he was the pass catcher, and now we're talking about complimentary running backs to him. I think, and why I say that is to come back to this. Let's say the ETN thing doesn't happen in the 1st round. I'm more concerned if they draft a beast, like if Javonte Williams fell. And they draft somebody like of that caliber power-wise. You go to Trey Sermon, whether or not you think Trey Sermon can be a bell cow or not. I'm more concerned about the power because Antonio Gibson wasn't used that much in the passing game. And even if they have that thought, does he get kicked to the complementary position instead of being the one who gets complimented by a running back? So I would rather see them draft the pass-catching running back than to go with the kind of the power guy.
Yeah, I think the power guy would be super annoying there because it might be between, unless if it's Najee, if it's Javonte Williams, I think those guys are, by far the best power backs that we're going to have in this class. But there's other guys that carried the load for their college team that, if they take Jermar Jefferson a little bit late, he could have a decent sized role. Same thing with a guy like Spencer Brown. These aren't spectacular running backs, but they're good enough to eat into carries and be annoying, especially when you have a guy like Antonio Gibson that seems like a more complimentary back, like you're mentioning. But once again, I don't think Gibson needs 25 touches a game. So if it's one of those guys and it's not Williams or Harris, I think he's going to be fine.
All right. Well, let me pivot this into where I was going to, Brandon, is all right. So with that thought in mind, what are there any vets that you're looking at this draft class and saying, whew, if somebody gets drafted to this team, I'm scared. Like this person's value got kicked down to splitting the backfield and it could potentially be done in 2021, as in he's not even relevant in 2022.
That's you know what, the one vet that if there was a running back drafted there could have me thinking that is Melvin Gordon, and we haven't talked about Denver, but Denver lets Phillip Lindsay go, and now it's just Melvin Gordon. If they draft somebody, that's suddenly I'm very interested in seeing how that competition plays out, or watching Melvin Gordon, scrutinizing him early on and wondering, is he the guy that's going to get overtaken after the first month of the season and he becomes the second back in Denver instead of the lead guy?
It's not even that. I'm glad you brought up Denver because that's the one team that I do think they're drafting a pass catching running back. Like I think everybody talking about Melvin Gordon is like, oh, he might be one of the safest volume guys. No, I'm with you. I legitimately think the Broncos are coming out of this draft with a pass catching running back.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. I mean, they're gonna draft a running back. They have to, right? I mean, they're not. they didn't get rid of Philip Lindsay. They're not going to address that now. So it just depends on how high and who that back is to see how excited we're going to get about it.
I'm with you with Denver, and I keep seeing, one of those guys mocked to them early in the second round, and I hate it. I hate it so much because it wrecks Melvin Gordon and it wrecks whoever the rookie is coming in for this year too. So it's not wholly and completely, but for the most part, because anytime you have a good young running back coming in, it seems like they're going to replace the veteran midway through the year, like we were talking about earlier. So I really, really don't like it. I think if you're talking about other veterans, I love David Montgomery, but I don't think he's necessarily safe in Chicago. And with whatever Matt Nagy's going to end up doing there, he could do some craziness. I think Buffalo too. You already mentioned Buffalo, I think, Jake, but Singletary and Moss are not safe. So if Buffalo goes ahead and takes someone too, I think that could be a boon for whoever they select.
Okay, with that in mind, Brandon, with kind of continue with this, I'm gonna jump to a separate question, but it's still gonna fold into this. So stay with me here on this one. So, is there anybody yet we haven't mentioned as a running back that you think could be in this conversation? That somebody who could at least be a complimentary fantasy value as an RB3 or 4 with long-term potential, or do you think we've kind of hit everybody at this point?
Are you basically asking for my who's a sleeper out there?
No, sleeper's a completely different question. My question here is this is almost a attack Jake kind of a question. Is there anybody that I didn't put in tier 3 that you think deserves to be in this group? With the no, that was actually tier 2. Is Carter's, Trey Sermon, Williams, Gainwell, and Herbert.
Well, I guess I'm gonna save the guy that I'm not gonna say he's full on in there, but I'm gonna save my sleeper for later. I think you're good. Romandre Stevenson is interesting from Oklahoma. He's got nice feet. He's got the nice size. Oklahoma always puts out, running back. So he would be someone I could consider on that level, or at least adjacent in the next neighborhood over, but very close. That's probably the guy that I would throw out there.
Scott.
I like the Stevenson call there. Do we consider Demetric Felton a running back or a wideout? Like that's, because he definitely
that's
has.
Why I brought up I said Ty Montgomery kind of in the write up is like we're going to end up with that same situation. Is it's going to depend on the team drafting him how they want to use him.
Way better than Ty Montgomery, I think.
Well, but again, the point is it's.
I know, I understand the comparison, but I mean, you mentioned Gainwell.
Okay, Antonio Gibson last year. People were saying like he could be drafted as a wide receiver. That we had that happen last year.
I think. Washington turned in the card, by the way, that he was a wide receiver, wasn't he? On their card, I believe. So
I think it was on their card at the time. Yeah, that's
right.
A good point.
He was one of the very few teams that considered him a wide receiver, and then they saw him in practice and they're like, this guy's running back. We'll put him at running back. So, I think the one guy that we haven't mentioned because Brandon brought up Stevenson. I think that's a good call, even though I'm a Texas fan. I'll give a little props to that OU kid, but I think it's Chuba Hubbard. He lost a ton of steam last year. He looked way more human coming off the ankle injury. But this is still a guy that is a track star and is unbelievably explosive and fast. So if he gets a little bit of, learning time, downtime, whatever it is, and maybe someone picks up an injury and he gets a shot, if he improves a little bit, he's got all the traits to be a really good running back in the NFL. So
completely agree.
I
think
Chuba.
That my problem is he's not back, and that's I think the kind of echoing what you're saying is I'll compare it to another one, Nick Chubb in college, and then his knee exploded 17 ways from Sunday. And then there was the question if he would ever get back to it. And he's probably still never been 100% what he was, but he's damn near close. He's like 95%. I think the problem, and what I agree with you on Hubbard, is if he was 100% pre-injury, I think we'd be talking about him as tier 2, potentially a day 2 pick. I think the problem is if you watched him play, it feels like he's about 85% of what he used to be right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, just how long is it going to take for him to get there? And is he going to get there? So that is obviously a big concern. But, if you're looking for dynasty drafts or something and he winds up in a spot, maybe like a Washington where he is definitely third fiddle, but he has a role to play. There's somewhere where he could, potentially break out.
All right, then, Brandon, this is where I was going to go, and this is why I kind of wanted to do this. So let's say Williams, Carter, Sermon, Herbert, Gainwell. We'll include Hubbard. We'll include Stevenson. So all of these running backs, I'm going to go team by team to you guys now. Team by team, if this team drafts any of those 7 running backs, concern level for the guy in front of them. All right?
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Brandon, I think this is a team that's interesting, especially with they letting Bernard go. How concerned would you be for Joe Mixon if any of those 7 got drafted by the Bengals?
Not immediate, but Mixon's had a problem, much like in my neck of the woods with Chris Carson, completing seasons. And so I think it would maybe cause me to drop Mixon a spot or 2, but I look at that offense will they'll be able to give this guy a complimentary role that allows him to develop, but still giving Joe Mixon, 17 plus touches per game. So I think I'd be okay with Mixon still.
I'd be okay with Mixon still for sure. I think he's unbelievably talented, but like Brandon said, man, he cannot stay on the field. So I think any of those guys landing in Cincinnati is a good spot for them, because I think Mixon's going to last on the Bengals. And when his contract's up, he's gone.
Okay. All right, Scott, come back to you. We're going to go back and forth on this one. So any of those 7 drafted, I think this is an interesting one because everybody loves the lead. It's amazing on a per touch basis, but let's also talk about somebody who shouldn't be touching it 20 times a game, despite the fact he's freaking yoked for his size. And he loves fantasy. I've given enough hints for everybody who this is. If the Chargers draft one of these 7, how concerned would you be for Austin Eckler?
Not too concerned, because once again,
really, I feel like they've been trying to find a compliment, and it just hasn't, because the Joshua Kelly and they've been trying.
Joshua Kelly sucks. I did not understand that pick at all. I don't like Joshua Kelly.
Hey, we're a nice player show here. Joshua Kelly could be better. How about that? Can we phrase it that way?
Look. He absolutely has potential, but he had a shot last year. He didn't take it. Like I said, none of these guys are complete, right? So there's more than enough time for Kelly to work out. But he had problems at UCLA with the coaching staff. He had, he didn't stay on the field at UCLA. Why did we think he was going to stay healthy in the NFL? And I'm sure adding a game is going to be great for him too. So, Jackson's a little undersized too. As is Austin Eckler. So they need a thumper. I'm with you, but once again, Eckler is one of those guys, a la Antonio Gibson, Travis Etienne. You don't need 25 carries a game, even though he's getting 25 touches a game. He doesn't need it to be successful. So I think the only thing that I worry about with him is if they get an absolute, if they draft a Stevenson or a Sermon, one of those gigantic backs, that's your goal line back. That's going to take red zone touches away from Eckler. So I'm more concerned about the type of back the Chargers would draft versus which, the fact that they draft a back.
Yeah, it's funny. I asked Daniel Popper, who covers the Chargers for The Athletic, if they would go after
inside information.
Yeah, and he was it surprised me. He was so big of a Josh Kelly fan. Said that he was one of the best players in camp. And he threw out kind of like early season, he lost some confidence. And then when I start hearing that, I'm like, man, I running back is a reactive position. There's not a whole lot of nuance to it. You either have natural ability that makes you a good running back or you don't. I think you can become a better running back, but only to a certain point. I think a lot of that stuff is just either have it or you don't. And I don't think Josh Kelly has it. And when I hear confidence, I'm like, well, okay, that's just, he was bad. And we're giving him an excuse for why he was bad. But I think the Chargers should look at a guy that would be a compliment to Eckler. And if that did happen, if one of these 7 went there, I wouldn't have Eckler on my fantasy team because I'd bump him into the early, RB2 class, like the very upper RB2 class. And there's always Eckler apologists who will take him way higher than I will, and which I would love to have Eckler in the current situation right now. I'm happy to welcome him to all my fantasy teams. But if they take somebody of this ilk, then I think it's going to definitely kind of harken back to the Melvin Gordon kind of setup. Maybe Gordon's is the slightly under platoon side of things instead of Eckler was back then. But I think you're going to see a reasonable size platoon.
Okay. So sticking with you, Brandon, I'll give you another. I almost want to go to Scott first on this because you already brought the name up. And you know what? I'm going to change the order because you already brought it up.
That's fine.
You said Mike Davis. I think if Atlanta drafts somebody in the first 3 rounds, that Mike Davis is already kind of out the window.
It's like deja vu all over again, right? Like Mike Davis for however long he signed with Chicago before they drafted Montgomery, we were kind of lining up as the guy.
That's what's in my mind. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and I think that would just happen all over again. Look at if it's the day 1 or day 2 running back, then I think Mike Davis is, his prospects in Atlanta have suffered drastically at that point.
Like Scott, it kind of feels like, to Brandon's point, and that's what was in my mind. It's kind of like we signed Mike Davis in case we don't get an answer in the draft.
Right.
Yeah. Look, I agree with that. Mike Davis is not the long-term solution. So I absolutely agree with that. If they draft someone in the first 2 rounds, that guy is going to get the run at the end of the season. So I'm with that. I think that Atlanta has so many holes that if they're going to be taking a back early, it's probably going to need to be because they traded out of that number 4 spot. So they're not getting Kyle Pitts. They have all their first 3 picks, but it's only 3 picks and they have so many holes. I just don't see them spending on a running back, even though that is a gigantic hole for them too. So there's just so much need on defense. And if you're going to go Kyle Pitts with that number 4 overall pick and address an offensive, part of the offense first, then I think you got to go defense with those next 2 picks. So I don't really see them taking it back until the 4th. And if we're in the 4th, I don't think that guy is going to usurp Mike Davis for the season. But
yeah, the fourth round and later, usually something happens, whether
an injury,
a roster cut, an injury, something like that, just vastly underperforming. Like those, once you get to the 4th round or later, those are usually the next year up type of situations. All right, so these are the last 2. And then we're going to talk the sleepers and get out of here, Brandon. Last 2, which I don't think a lot of people are talking about, but potentially the 2 biggest lost values from now until 2 weeks from now and the draft is over, Brandon. And I'm going to just throw both of them out there. They're both rookies. One was highly touted. One was undrafted. You can probably figure them out. Mm-hmm. If the Detroit Lions, with a new regime, draft somebody with DeAndre Swift, and if the Jaguars draft somebody with also a new head coach, James Robinson and DeAndre Swift, are they basically the most dangerous values right now without knowing what that might happen in the draft?
First of all, I can't fathom Detroit doing that high. I mean, so many needs. You bring in Jamal Williams. You still have Kerryon Johnson for his 7 to 9 games per year.
I was going to say snaps.
7 to 9 snaps. James Robinson's the one that makes the most sense. Divine Azigbo and Raekwon Armstead, that's not good backup value. I mean, we don't even know how good that is because those guys have never really been on the field much. But I was wondering about like a Trey Sermon, someone that Urban Meyer has like history with. If they brought that in, I would be concerned about that. I forget who I talked to from the Jags. It covers the Jags. It said that Robinson's going to be the guy, and if he loses, volume percentage, it'll probably be made up by the fact that their offense should have a much higher ceiling, and that there'll be more fantasy point pie to go around. And I kind of buy into that, but if it's like a 2nd or 3rd rounder, I mean, Urban Meyer has there's no attachment to James Robinson. He didn't do anything for Urban Meyer. So, I mean, as much as we think, this guy was an undrafted and he returned RB1 value, Urban Meyer's just going to go out there and it's probably going to be a clean slate with the rookie coming in. If it's a day 2 rookie, then man, I'd be concerned. I'd absolutely be concerned for Robinson.
Yeah, I'm with Funston on this one. I mean, first of all, let me just say I'm insulted that you would even infer that DeAndre Swift would lose playing time to someone that the Lions draft.
And we've seen it before.
And I don't like. I like Jamal Williams coming out, but obviously I feel like he's lost a lot of steam. I always thought Aaron Jones was better than him, and he obviously is. So, but I think Williams is a great backup to Swift, but I think that's what he is a backup. And
but see, that's my point. I'm with you, Scott. We talked about on your show last year. Everybody knows I love the
Swift.
Biggest fans of Swift. But if they draft somebody in the first 3 rounds, even the 4th round, like. No, I know we can't see that, but it's a new regime. They don't care.
It's true.
That would be that. The reason I asked this question is because if the Jaguars or the Lions do this, that tells us almost an insight to what they're thinking.
That's true. But I think the Lions are so terrible that there is like, if they draft a running back in the first 3 rounds, unless they got 5 picks for someone to take that number 7 overall, like they move back with whoever, and they
look
got
at the Giants. They had glaring needs and took Saquon Barkley. Like, you just never know.
Okay, but Saquon Barkley's generational running back. There's not one of these in this class. So
I'm just
look.
Like
I'm not knocking your question. What I'm saying is,
sounds like you are,
is that if the Lions do that, if the Lions do that, it's a legit question because we've seen it happen before. Like, you just had examples. If the Lions do that, everyone should be fired the day after the draft. They had the worst defense. They were 32nd in pass rush, in pressure rate. They can't cover the back end. They have big needs at wide receiver too. Brashad Perriman's their number 1 going into the year with Tyrell Williams.
I
mean, they have so many needs on this team. This is the worst roster in the NFL right now, that it would be so dumb for them to take a running back. So I can't see that happen. And I love Swift. So that one just goes way to me. I am absolutely with Funston on the Jaguars and James Robinson. I love James Robinson. I was not, I didn't know much about him like anybody else did. I watched a little bit of his Illinois State tape, but it's hard to kind of break down some of these FCS guys because the competition is rough, against them. It's real bad. So they might just look like a, varsity kid playing on a freshman team. So, there's some of that mixed in there, but he came in, he did the work, and he got the job. I like Raquel Armstead out of Temple, but COVID wiped him out last year, and he just wasn't the same guy.
People forgot about that.
If he's going to be the same guy moving in. Ozigbo had a shot, didn't do it. So I definitely think they take a backup. But, I think it is dangerous if it's a guy like Trey Sermon that Urban Meyer has ties to, or someone that did carry the load in college, like a Jermar Jefferson or someone like that, because those are workhorse type of guys. And if Urban Meyer decides he likes those guys better, he's not going to be shy about throwing them in. So I'm a little worried about James Robinson, but I think whoever they get is going to be his backup.
Hopefully. I'm hoping, because I'm with you. I love some James Robinson, and kudos to Emory Hunt for that one, because, it's like you said, it's kind of tough, and you're like, am I just seeing somebody just that much better than everybody else, or, is it realistic? And then he said, go back and watch some more. And I said, all right, fine, Emory, you win. I trust you. I'm moving up James Robinson. All right, so kind of in that vein, Brandon, and we'll get out of here on this. Any running backs? Maybe we mentioned the name in passing. Who's like the one where you think might be a little bit overlooked, sleeper, whatever the hell you want to call it?
Did I just hear you say Jermar Jefferson, Scott?
I did. Yeah.
That's the guy I like. I could see him being a quality NFL back. I watched him against my Washington Huskies, and he put up like 130 yards, and he was an absolute thorn. I was cursing his name, and that's like, the Huskies had one of the best defenses in the Pac-12. They'll have 2 defensive linemen that'll go probably in the first 2 rounds of the draft. And he's got good quickness, not straight line speed, but I think straight line speed's a little bit overrated because running backs don't get a chance to use straight line speed very much in the NFL. It's about your short area quickness, your short area vision, and he's got that. And I like
really.
Yes.
See, no. It's like I agree with the vision. I actually, in my draft profile, I said he has 2010 vision. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I actually don't think he has the short. That's my concern, and I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong. That's why I'm jumping in, is because I would love to hear your pushback on this, and then you, of course, jump in, Scott. But I actually think that Jefferson's struggle, that's my area of concern, is the immediate short area. That if he's on, talk about worrisome offensive lines. If he's on an offensive line that doesn't let him get those first few steps, it's that first step, it's that quick initial burst. That's my concern. I think once he gets up to speed, he's one of the better options, but I have a feeling he's going to struggle in that range.
I think you're talking about 2 separate things there, though, right? Right, Brandon? Isn't that decisiveness and explosion? Because he has the explosion. We see it in the open field. I think the decisiveness might be a little lacking. And
I've seen him knocked for just going down too easily. And I didn't see that. I mean, I haven't watched every piece of film out there on it, but I've seen him a lot. I think he's a little bit more physical in ability to like not just fall on contact right away. I think he's better in that department than he gets credit for. And sometimes, the short area quickness of vision, they can kind of get wrapped in. If a guy sees guys see holes well, it can make him seem like he's got good short area quickness when he's actually just really good at finding the daylight.
For me, a guy, I don't know, did we mention Elijah Mitchell yet? I really
haven't.
like Elijah Mitchell
Group
out
of
of
next guys.
Yeah, out of Louisiana. I mean, 4.33 in the 40. You know, he's got burst. He's got decent vision. I think he's once again, you know, not FCS, but a G5 kid with a lot of production. But he can catch the ball too. You know, he did split with Regis there forever, and you know they even mixed in. His name escapes me. The third guy who's going to be the starter there, huge for CFF this year too. But I'm excited about Elijah Mitchell, depending on his landing spot too. I think he would be great in like a backing up James Robinson kind.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see that. All right, so I'll give mine before we get out of here, and not to shout out his name again, but I'm stealing something from Emery because he made a really good point. And so this is the statement is his. I'm already in on the player before Emery. That's Puka Williams, because I like the guys like Hubbard. I like that you brought him up before, Scott. Like, people forgot about them, like the hype that they had 2 years ago. And if you look at Williams, the situation with Herbert kind of gives a testament to how good Herbert is that Herbert was holding off Puka from being able to have the backfield to himself. And then Herbert left for Virginia Tech, and then Puka got to show some things again. The size is a concern. Let's be honest. You know, that's why I think he's going to be a complimentary piece. But we're talking about
stuff too.
Yeah, of course. But if we're talking purely fantasy in today's NFL, do I think he'll be a top 15, 20 running back? Probably not. But could he be Tariq Cohen, J.D. McKissick, Theo Ray, like these top 25, 30s, half full point PPR, where you're fine with them as your RB3? Yeah. What'd you say, Brandon?
I said like Nyheim Hines kind of.
Yeah, there's another good one.
Yeah. I like that call, Jake, because Puka Williams, you can see it when you watch him, the athleticism and the explosiveness and, you know, the short area burst, all that is there with him. It's just he played for Kansas, and Kansas is horrific in college football. They're not good, you know, and he had Khalil Herbert there too. They went through coaching changes a bunch there. So, there's a lot to like there, but he definitely comes with some baggage.
Yeah, 100%. Well, speaking of baggage, has someone I stayed with you, Scott. Tell everybody once again, remind everybody where to find your great work, and thanks for coming on as a guest so you get this time.
Well, I appreciate it. And maybe you guys will join me because I'm going to be doing a live stream for the NFL draft. If you can, any of the 3 days. See, that's my move is I ask you guys on the air. So you can't say no. So
no, because I'm going to say no, but then you throw in any of the 3 days and say like, all right, I know you're not nonstop working on the third day in round 6 type of crap.
That's right. That's right.
Come on now.
Come on in the 6th, Jake, and we'll talk about what has already happened in the draft. Funston, whenever you can, man, just let me know.
I
when
might
you
be
can,
able to make a deal with you. You do our Sunday/Monday Dynasty 4-round rookie draft with us, and I might jump on air with you.
It'll be a slow
sold.
All right. I think
and if it's coming on to, you know, just talk about the slow draft, that's fine with me too. So but
just made a live trade.
Yeah, exactly. This is the behind the workings here. But yes, please check out my Twitter at Bogman Sports. You can see I tweet about all the shows that I do there. I do a little basketball, I do football, I do baseball, I do college football and college fantasy as well. And if you check out our Patreon, the Welsh and I are hard at work over there. Like I said, we got group me rooms, we've got secret shows where we do comedy shows where we talk about stuff that has happened to us. Most recently, I actually got recognized by a listener for the first time ever.
Wow.
So that was an interesting story. We have stuff like that. We have group me rooms, we have rankings. So I'd appreciate if you check that out, patreon.com/ITL Army. And thanks for having me on once again, guys. I really appreciate it.
No, it was definitely good guess. One of the better ones. And then you get usurped by Emery on Thursday. Sorry.
Yeah.
The czar of the playbook. But no, seriously, you guys already know where to follow myself and Brandon and everything at The Athletic. The top 85 rookies are up there. If you need fantasy baseball help, we still have that for you guys. I wave my hand because it's like, you guys are frustrating to love fantasy. You love to yell at us for fantasy baseball, but this is fantasy football. Brandon and I will be back on Thursday, as I mentioned, with Emery Hunt to talk. What are we talking? Wide receivers. And then next Wednesday, not Tuesday, quarterbacks and tight ends before the draft. Thanks again, Scott. And we'll see you guys next time.